Hi,
Welcome to another episode of the Healing Matrix Online. Today's guest is John Clutterbuck. John, welcome to the show.
thank you.
You're welcome. A pleasure to have you on. And John, you are a mind, body, health, fitness, and vitality coach with over 24,000 client hours. You've been working in the industry for 25 years now, and you have worked
Yes.
with a variety of health issues and people. And you sort of started mainly working with people physically, doing lots of different things. And then lately your interest has grown more into the mind, well-being, psychological and emotional health.
That's correct.
I wanted to ask you a little bit how, I mean, my understanding is that you were physically very active from a very early age. And
Oh yeah, that was my relaxation space.
Great. And so I just wanted to know a little bit about how you got into this, how you got into helping people, how you got into working with people.
Yeah, so my body, I mean, it sounds a bit corny, but my modality of kind of, I suppose it was escape from very difficult emotional experiences actually from quite early on, was and to some extent still is, not nearly as much as it used to be, my physical body. It's in a different way these days, but going back into my childhood, I had my brother was 10 years older than me. He was always, coaxing me on to sort of let me push my best out in an endurance sport of cycling, from very early on. He was in the Southern England team for British cycling and competing nationally, etc. So that was a strong influence, and he kind of helped me to find that refuge really within my physical body. So that's always been my go-to. That's always been my modality of regulation. And I think that from an early age, it was because of an emotional sort of kind of bunch of social difficulties inside my dynamics, people around me. That was my coping mechanism really. So I'm sort of well versed in self-care from that early stage in life, and so that's really informed the latter and the kind of formative years of my being. So very much traditionally into the physical realm, from endurance and strength sports, and right into observation of physical sensations in a meditative practice called Vipassana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. So how interesting, because I think what I was thinking as you spoke is that often people who work a lot with the body and physically and particularly sort of in the personal training arena, often they will be looking at sort of sculpting the body and making a body look beautiful and
the egoic stuff, right?
And so on. But I think what struck me from what you said, you used the word refuge, and I was thinking how a body can also be the place that you go to help cope with whatever's going on in your life.
Absolutely.
Which already immediately sort of adds a different slant into working with the body, into health and adapting to the environment and circumstances and so on, which I guess
think intuitively, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it takes me to thinking how you didn't only become a sports person who just, became physically active, but you had an interest in terms of helping people heal. Again, I know that you have worked with people with lots of conditions and a variety of health situations and presenting issues. Yeah. So I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about you, about what you find and what your understanding of health is and your understanding of diseases. What do you observe in people that come to see you?
So that word disease, thank you for mentioning that, is anything that takes someone away from ease, right? And we all were looking, I believe, for dis-ease, the ease of not having a dis-ease. So, naturally, through the study of yoga and sort of some Eastern philosophy sort of tied in with the kind of mind-body practices in the East, it seemed somewhat differently to the West. So I've done some yoga, I've done some Tai Chi Qigong, and it generally seems that their view is that there is already a flow of natural health vitality, being Qi or Prana, as a base level. And as, I could quote one guru, you don't need a reason to be happy. You need a reason to be unhappy. And also there's this, the psychological, the analytical, more heady, if you like, space that I think a lot of Western people will get into, trying to fix problems that they see as the underlying kind of state, that there is a problem, and there's more of acceptance that things just are in other views and other philosophies. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that we work with, acceptance of what is, that things are difficult, and get through those difficulties in whichever way we can. And sometimes it's unhealthy ways. And I think my work and my job is to help people to see what is really the sustainable picture, what is the way out of one level of continually learning the same mistakes, and kind of re-inviting a learning kind of sequence of events through habituation, and having to relearn that lesson again and again and again. There is an opportunity to, it's not necessarily going to get that much easier. It might do relatively, because you start to learn new lessons at a different level, rather than a problem chasing its tail, so to speak, with trying to address underlying causations by treating the symptoms with something that's not really going to reduce the causation, or like address the root cause. So seeing what that root cause is, and actually learning at that level, and creating sustainable ways of living, and learning new lessons at a different level of existence, really. Certainly in the physical body has been my earlier sort of point of reference. And so I think from that, the development of that as kind of a foundation in groundedness and sort of strength, and then growing into flexibility. And that experience has really been my most valuable asset, to be able to help others to see what is, and deal with that in a kind of a more progressive way, rather than habitually sort of staying in one place kind of way.
So looking at
the question, sorry, I might have gone off. Yeah. So looking at repetitive patterns.
Right. Okay. Yes, because I think that's what you were saying. So what I became interested in is you have got such a variety of tools, because you were talking about Tai Chi and Qigong, you were talking about Vipassana, both of which, or even all three of them, are related to breath work and how we breathe, and how we nourish our body, and the cells in our body, and so on. Plus all the physical stuff you're talking about. You also do some massage therapy, and also lately you have incorporated more hypnotherapy and other approaches. So when somebody comes to see you, how do you work with them? What do you look at? What is it that you are looking out for? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that given the experience, really, not only the background, my own growth curve, let's say, into understanding myself on a physical and then an emotional level, finding ways to cope with difficulties that happen in life. Also, the client one-on-one hours has given a vast sort of exposure to different kinds of, different understandings, really, of what's walking through the door, and who is really coming in. It depends on how they've been co-created in their family dynamics, of course, and their own worldview is very much influenced, and sometimes quite hard forged. And so it tends to be that guide those views, invite, really, is what I'm doing for people to see things in perhaps a different way, to understand themselves differently, understand the world differently. It can be a bit more severe in terms of a deep-seated belief that they are not lovable, or not worthy somehow, and that might need a little more of an analytical approach, and a bit of a longer period of therapeutic understanding. However, other people may already have developed a very finely attuned skill set. And yet, although they have great abilities, fundamentally their views are not allowing them to apply those skills in the most effective way for them. And it could be 1 or 2 sessions and they have a massive breakthrough. So it does depend on who they are. And I think that the stage of life that they are at as well is hugely significant. The ways that they've been managing to cope up to certain times when they come. Well, hypnotherapists have quite often the situation where I think, I believe there's a lot of other methodologies that are explored and sort of people trying to identify problems outside of themselves in various modalities. And then finally they say, well, okay, maybe someone's going to help me just by waving a magic wand or something, or I need hypnotherapy and then all my problems are going to be fixed. And actually that's it, for the client becomes a very interesting opportunity, because they've tried everything else and they are more likely to be ready to change at that point. So I see that as a huge opportunity for people to may not be difficult, may be difficult, depending. But I can help them by holding space for them and getting them to feel really safe. So with all the experience I have holding space for various sort of presenting issues, people, their experiences, co-created family relations and interpersonal relations, all of their belief system has been so hardwired and habituated. It's going to be quite difficult sometimes for people to make those changes they need to make. But fundamentally, down the line, they're looking at worse scenarios. And so they're much more likely to be willing to change. Whether they're ready, that's another question. And that's what I help people with.
So in your perspective, what is that? What's the tipping point? What is the place? Because you were talking about that moment where people may have tried different things and maybe different modalities, different people, and somehow they get to a point where they may be ready to change. What is it that takes them to that shifting position, to that turning point?
Yeah, I think that it can be 2 things. Mainly, people I think have just tried so hard to continue to try and get the changes that they want outside themselves in the world. I'm fine, it's just everybody else, kind of egocentric views oftentimes are kind of part of that whole worldview, and they're looking for a fix that is sort of something out there. And people sometimes will just get so, it's just becomes so tedious that we're working so hard to try and identify something outside themselves that actually they've exhausted the possibilities, which is when the hypnotherapists tend to get the inquiries, and there's that opportunity I spoke of just now. Or they've been well aware all along of the real underlying issue intuitively, and they've been diverted away from that for some time, and then they kind of, it's just like a flower that opens in a really beautiful and graceful way because they've been building up to that moment. So either it's kind of like, you're up against the brick wall and there's a breakthrough in that way, or there's something of a letting go that happens naturally. Either way, there's transformation at that point.
Yeah. And you invite them to take responsibility for that. By the sounds of it, you invite them to see that they are health and they are disease and they are whatever they create in that sense. So the change is within rather than without.
My intention is to help people with their self-care. So my intention is to help people with their self-care, and they're taking responsibility ultimately to be able to self-support, to self-regulate, to manage all of the difficult things that before perhaps would have presented such a kind of a catastrophization perception, or there's a situation that's seen and understood in a certain way. All of that view can change when they're willing to change within themselves. So I'm hopefully getting the kind of people who are ready to make that kind of transformation. I really, I can work with people who are sort of building up to the stage of letting go of old ways that are not serving them anymore for a time. But at some point in that program, I'm going to be leading them to make that decision themselves. And at that point, I'm not going to be supporting them in wasting their own time anymore.
Right. Okay. So in other words, I guess what you do is you facilitate people, you facilitate transformation for people. So you take people wherever they're at, and through the different modalities that you use and the experience that you've acquired over the years and so on, you put that at their service to transition them from that place of repetitiveness and stuckness into a place where they can create something new. Is
Absolutely.
that likely? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Breakthroughs in health, fitness, and vitality.
Right. Great. Okay. So my understanding is that you are mainly based in London, although I know you do quite a lot of work online as well. So you have got access to people all around the world.
Correct.
London is a very multicultural place. So I'm assuming that you have worked with lots of people from a variety of backgrounds and so on.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you have identified? Are there any patterns that you've identified in that? What seems to be at the heart of most people's problems tends to be this kind of belief, or is it this kind of experience, or what have you noticed?
It's an interesting question. I think that everybody is absolutely and completely unique, and everybody in that uniqueness needs something that is bespoke for them, and it may be a combination of different kinds of supports. As to a trend, I think that there's a lot of sort of fidgety people that have a kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, as it's called, and the energy that they have doesn't really have an outlet, and it's almost like things are amplified with more sedentary lifestyles and more in less time. Generally, I think that there's a certain, in my view and judgment, a hedonistic kind of culture where the context of our existence is somewhat forgotten. The fact that we are genetically predisposed to a lot more health, fitness, and vitality naturally when we are more physically active. The cells become more, they find more balance, equilibrium, if you will, biochemically. The motor neurosystem becomes much more informed about balance when you are in space, where we're moving around in a physical environment. And I think that there's huge benefits that are being overlooked in education, value of physical exercise for the health of the brain chemistry, and the ability to take in information and concentrate massively increases. Statistically, it's been proven with cardiovascular exercise particularly, and there's all the other benefits of motor neuro planning, motor planning when you're climbing a climbing wall, or just being involved in the physical environment. We are massively lacking that in our society, and that problem is increasing. Obesity is increasing. You're not moving enough. You're not going to be boosting your metabolism, and people wonder why they haven't got as much energy. Well, they're probably not physically active enough, and actually far more active than we ever were, in a kind of sedentary way, in a cerebral way, and trying to fit too much in with not enough sleep. That's an increasing issue as well. Whereas the best thing for health, fitness, and vitality is so often overlooked is sleep. People really need to get that in for things like growth and repair in the physical body, for to be able to relax and not carry around too much tension in the physical body, because there's not enough time to find equilibrium back in the cells of the peripheral, arms and legs and your physical body. The organs, of course, find a lot more equilibrium once you've had enough sleep too. So there's a certain vitality which we're lacking, and I think that there's a lot of sort of jumped up, hyped up kind of prefrontal cortex stimulation through, that there's a part of the brain which operates out of fight, flight, or freeze, and we're kind of a lot of the time running on adrenaline, when naturally, if we had that adrenaline and we were moving around, that adrenaline would be able to leave the body and would be able to relax a lot earlier after the secretion of the hormone adrenaline itself. Because with the physical movement, you're pumping that hormone out of your body, able to process it quicker and find a relaxation point with the reduction of the volume of adrenaline in the circulatory system earlier after it's been secreted. So I'm aware of people sitting around with that in their system for longer, and they're coming with the symptoms of adrenaline and cortisol for long periods during their days through the cerebral stimulation, and not really able to process on a physical level quick enough to be able to relax properly before bedtime. Looking at screens before going to sleep. The blue light tells the brain through the retina that it's midday because you've got the ultraviolet light. Okay, we've got different colors and screens available now. But the kids don't really, children, particularly adolescents, they're looking, I think, in that group for some kind of something to achieve, something that I think we are quite well. Actually, a central neurological system, I believe, is wired to around early 20s, which would be the prime time of our lives if we were living 100,000 years ago. It would be the kind of point in in the lifeline that one might, I don't know, climb a tree and retrieve a beehive for the honey, and then the status in the village would automatically go up. And that's a very important time to establish the social values, and then of course increasing status enables one to find a better mate. And this is very Darwinian kind of archaic views, but we see the significance of them at these ages in late adolescence, early adulthood. So that wired in idea that I must achieve something now is correlated, I think, with a lot of the anxieties. And the field where one expresses that value is now through the screen on Instagram and Facebook and their social status on social media. And that, I think, is a bit of a problem. I think there's a lot of anxiety around that, and a lot of that walks through the door, so to speak. Even with people into their early 40s, because we're living longer, and I think that people are, nutrition's better, we have a better lifestyle. People are not burning out as early as they would have, because they've got all of the juicing and everything, and they're actually realizing that the energy output in their lives is not actually sustainable at slightly later than it would have been 10, 20 years ago. Earlier, I think a couple of decades ago, I think people would have come to that burnout point earlier and said, well, hang on a minute, I'm working so hard doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm compacting all of this in. And that's just more sustainable now because we've got things like juicing, we've got more awareness of health and vitality. That's good, but it's just kicking it down the road, and people are getting burned out in their early 40s. So I see that trend.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yes, that's really interesting. And I'll tell you where my thinking sort of started. You were talking about the importance of sleep, which of course is well known and well documented and so on. And then I started thinking, my sleep is different when I go to bed tired because I have moved around and so on, than when I go to bed and I still get the same amount of hours, but I am not tired. I'm not physically tired. There hasn't been that sort of exchange of the movement in my cells, fluids, hormones, and everything. And so then, as you continue to talk about movement and a travel situation and so on, I started thinking about how our life is lacking some realness, in the sense that a lot of our relationships are virtual because of the social media and stuff. The way we get, when you were talking about blue light, there's almost like a virtual sunlight that you get in the middle of the night, things like that.
Yeah.
And how we may be lacking, because again, I think in terms of movement, one can go to the gym and can do a few things and a few exercises or go for a jog. But what we don't get anymore is that naturally embedded danger awakeness sort of cycle in our life, where you have to go and hunt. And there may be a few dangers that you face when you go and get your food. And so you have to be aware and you have to be thinking. And it's, you don't get in your car in autopilot, just go to the supermarket, buy your food, go back and cook it. So what I was thinking is, with what we have available today, because we no longer live in a dangerous world, mostly, and so on, what would you advise people? What would you advise our viewers and listeners to do to get into that sort of optimal point of health? What would you recommend?
Well, I've heard it said that I mean, it's from someone who is a qualified coach, level 3. He has said, do something that scares you once a day, and it meant something like, physical. I think there's value to that, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to step into an unsafe environment on a physical level, because I can't afford to injure myself. I'm supporting far too many people.
Of course,
but
I'm not thinking about
but
I'm not thinking about unnecessary danger. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Safety, absolutely key. But at the same time, I think that there's great value in the physical realm, in doing an exercise where the requirements to actually do the particular exercise you're engaging in means you have to focus. And it can be, for example, there's cycling. There's not much room really for your brain to think in terms of getting stuck in a in a thought pattern that might lead to anxiety, for example, or a panic attack. In some people, that eventually does show its unwanted, difficult head, let's say, through the patterning of thoughts. And doing something on a regular basis where there isn't actually much room to get too involved in thought, actually, it becomes a moving meditation, because if you're concentrating on something else, and that's taking away the required concentration to do that particular exercise. Let's take, just for instance, cycling, and you have thin tires, and I don't know, there's a drain cover that has those lines, and the front wheel might go down between you have to watch out for those little potholes, especially here in the UK. They're not so bad in the EU tarmac, as I discovered last summer. It was very nice. That's a story perhaps for another time, but I actually know I'll talk about that. So since we're talking about cycling, I managed to ride my bicycle from Calais to very near Rome last summer, and it was an average of 100 miles per day. And what I noticed was the required concentration was very positive for my state of mind. The sleep was much deeper, of course, because of the physical exertion. You're just going to hit the sack and just go straight down as soon as you can, because you have to get up and do it all again all too soon. But the benefits, I think, of meditatively, of having something where you really can't afford to focus on anything else. Otherwise, the exercise simply wouldn't be possible to achieve. And that goes into the mind-body realm quite nicely, really, with repetitions of certain exercises, particularly those ones that are not achievable without a full focused concentration on what it is you're doing in your physical body and how it is you're doing that. Furthermore, in combination with your breathing, so finding a synchronicity between mind and body through the observation of breath, at which point you are in your breath cycle combined in synchronization with certain points or moments within movements. That's highly valuable, because your brain will just focus and you will achieve something through that focusedness. It's conditioning a positive association with that habituation. And I think there's a very interesting modality of training for the brain by implementing observations of breath inside movements that are not achievable without 100% focus. It becomes a moving meditation, and that becomes all of the other stuff. It can just fade away. All of the difficult thoughts and perhaps even feelings that I learned earlier in my self-development program, let's call it. Difficult feelings can be managed through exercise, and that's highly valuable. It really, really is.
And yet it sounds as though you're talking about the moving version of it rather than just sitting and meditating. I mean, I'm assuming you also talk about the benefits of sitting and meditating, but at this particular moment, you're talking about being present and being mindful in what you do. Is that correct?
So there's something, let me describe about Vipassana. There's a 3-day period on a 10-day retreat, which is a silent retreat, where you're observing the sensations around the breathing. Now, this sharpens the mind, and the mind's then sharp ability to perceive physical sensations is then taken in a body scanning kind of exercise all around the body, which can be quite shocking if you've done it properly. There's quite a lot of increased, sharpness of awareness of sensations that then can fully scan things that you haven't ever even thought that there might even be something, I don't know, in whichever part of your body. If you can somehow fine tune your awareness, it might be through sitting first and then applying that awareness into a physical movement. That's great because you're getting physical exercise and meditating in at the same time, really. And that's the modality that I've just been speaking about, really. Now, some people might find the sitting practice very difficult. They might prefer a lying down meditation. They might prefer observation of movement in their physical body whilst moving. That's something of a sharpening of the awareness, and then the observation of what it is you're doing becomes more acutely informed. I think that it's also it's very useful to be able to work with whatever presents. And so some days you might be more susceptible to loss of concentration. You might be having a particularly emotionally difficult day. You might have had an argument with your partner or whatever it might be. These thoughts come. If you're one of these people who just kind of hides, represses, denies that which is perceived to be unwanted, that's going to generate a problem. So we need to accept what is there, observe it, and then let it go, and then move your concentrated effort back into what it is you've chosen to consciously focus on. So allowing what comes to come, and then like a stick down a river, you might just have that view, that visualization of a cloud moving through the sky, whatever it is that you choose to use to let that thought or feeling pass, having accepted, having learned from that experience, letting it go, and then choosing consciously to focus again on what it is you've chosen to. That is a very, very good practice. And that can be happening in your body, like I say, or just a sitting practice, physical body while you're moving and breathing away of the combination of the two. Or it can be just a sitting or lying meditation, which I think, there's so much health and fitness. It's kind of the world's gone crazy, and perhaps the calling is actually for a more of a what would be a more of a valuable use of time, maybe the bliss points in the 24-hour cycle. Because a lot of, again, coming back to your question about what is a general in presenting issues, what's the average kind of, the most, let's talk about causations. Let's talk about root causes, if you don't mind, Urtzi. So I believe that there's a lot of instability, cravings for sugar, tension, emotional instability, from a lack of bliss points in the 24-hour cycle. And so sometimes, and I think oftentimes, people are actually just craving that. They're looking for that bliss point, and they'll go for the sugar. They'll go for the rush of adrenaline from an exercise regime which is way, way over the top and super unsustainable. They're training 6 times a week, doing whatever it might be. And let's look at creating a sustainable picture over your week, over your month. And where's that relaxation space within all of the stuff that you're pushing out there? Let's have an internal awareness. Let's have a sort of a new understanding of your physical and emotional body, and find a regular spot for that, as well as the fitness, because then the likelihood is the root cause of trying to find that bliss point through sugar or whatever it might be, that could be eradicated. You might not need to train so hard to try and burn off those sugar calories, So looking at root cause presentation, I think that a lot more relaxation and acceptance is okay to just be with what is. That can be managed better, I think, in today's what walks through the door.
So let me share with you what I think I understood in that, and then you can tell me whether what you're saying is the same or not. But I was curious that it took me back to what we were talking about earlier on, when we were saying that people come to you because they feel stuck in repetitive patterns, and what you do is you use all the tools available to facilitate transformation, i.e.
to help them create healthy autonomy. That's really what we're looking for.
Yes, and in that you take them to that sort of turning point where change is possible, where you're going to move beyond the gravity of that sort of pattern of feeling stuck into something familiar, to actually transform their life into something that is different, and to create change. And so then I was thinking about, if we really zoom in into the micro of what you just were describing in terms of awareness, every single moment when we pay attention to our experience as it happens, in that moment we have got the capacity to change. Because when we are fully aware and fully present of our experiences we created, we also have the choice to create something different. Whereas when we are on autopilot, then we just repeat the same things without bringing that choice and that awareness into the situation. So then it looks as though the sustainability of a training plan, of a meal plan, of a meditation plan, or anything that you may create around it, would be nothing but a reflection of their inner transformation in their inner world. Is that correct?
Well, let's just take a step back before that. So when a client comes to me, I had one recently, I'm not going to name anybody, but there was this idea that there's something out there that I need to fix. There's this part of my physical body that's then influencing this part. It's a very fixed kind of idea. I encourage people to review those ideas.
Of course.
Particularly if they seem to be quite intellectually driven. And the reason I do that is to create what I call what one feels when one understands what's really going on the subconscious level. It's all very well having these fixed ideas intellectually and having your meal plans and having your workout plans and sticking to them like some, machine. But we're not machines, we're organisms. And we need to respond like organisms when things change. So there's a different kind of, let's go back to that word, navigability. So there's, let's say we're on an ocean. How is it you're going to get to your destination when the treachery of the open water can change in any given day? Well, I know I'm from Portsmouth, where the actual motto of Portsmouth City is "Heaven's light, our guide." There's a historic maritime reference there. Until you know exactly where it is you are on, very difficult to know the best way to get to your destination. So when people are at sea, they don't really go, or traditionally they wouldn't go, right, we want to get there, let's sail towards that direction. No, the first X on the map is where they are now. And from that awareness, the stars, the tides, perhaps land references if we're lucky, you can actually tact, so there's this movement you do depending on the direction of the prevailing wind. There's all sorts of planning to get you to your destination, which is the second X on the map. But first is understanding and often discovering where it is you are now. So hypnotherapeutically, I will help people to discover that for themselves. And that's done with an exploration normally of the dynamics that are driving certain behaviors and understanding those dynamics at a conscious level through going into the subconscious level. What does that mean? So conscious, I'm aware of this now. This is my, ability. I can do maths. I can be aware very much, and I can apply that awareness to a disciplined regime very, very good and probably quite effectively because I'm me. But then if you're a kind of person who gets sabotaged again and again with your diet plan or your training regime, whatever it might be that you want to achieve, there's something in the way. There's a roadblock that we need to uncover. Perhaps we need to dive deep down and have a little look at what that block looks like, uncover some seaweed. And, it can be a bit of a journey. There can be some regression. There can be going back to past sensitizing events where the child, the earlier person, before they became an adult, understood or identified themselves as being a certain way in response to a certain situation. And there's a sort of label that they put on themselves. I'm like this. And also, this is how I manage. because I'm like this in this situation, I do this. Oh, it worked. And they try it again slightly down the line after that, whatever sensitizing event might be. Oh, it worked again. And that modality, that way of responding to a certain situation may work when they are that age. But then when that person matures into an adult, that modality can become inappropriate because they're no longer a child. But because it's been habituated so many times for so long, the tendency recurs because it's been, it's been wired in. There's an opportunity to change that sensitizing event or the perception of what actually happens with a regression, for example. And that very same change in perception is equal to a change in the neurology, because when you start to see something differently, you can understand it from a different point of view and get a different, a chosen response. That can all be programmable in the subconscious mind and making it useful in your everyday life. So we'll do that. We'll help people to understand themselves, their past reactive ways, and from that understanding, through going into the subconscious mind, possibly regression, probably through an emotional gateway, let's call it. One can then review the interpretations of the past, understand the reactions thereof of the past, and change consciously through the choice, through the response, rather than the old knee-jerk reactions of the past. So it's really the usefulness comes from understanding the root cause of often, there's something called secondary gains, which have also been established in those old patterns of responses that we need to eradicate as well. There's ideas that need to be blown out of the nooks and crannies of the old structures. Let's not discount the neurology. So this happens on a physical level. There's a certain thought pattern which is mirrored in the mind mapping of neurological connections. So between the brain cells, there's these connections, neurological connections, and that's wired in a certain way. So, okay, certain situation, perceived situation, let's say there's a social perceived situation. I identify myself in that situation in a certain way. I then respond to that situation with the old pattern that worked. So I'm just retreading that line and reinforcing that line of neurological patterning. So what does that look like? So you could say on a forest floor, there's a path that gets trodden at a certain stage. Every time that path's retrodden, that neurological sequence of neurological connections in the brain is established more and more until you get down to, the soil in the forest floor, or possibly the bedrock, And so what we look at is, by changing the understanding, changing the behavior, habituating every time in a different chosen response, we're actually growing new neural pathways. We're actually allowing the person to tread new, perhaps, one step at a time, new territory, new pathways through, let's say, the forest floor, and getting that line, that new path established through repetition, and getting that as a more habituated, automated response, rather than the old pattern. So that's the value of hypnotherapy. It's so powerful. It's so helpful. And what I find is people won't actually do anything they don't want to do. They're very comfortable doing what it is that I invite them to, because they're doing it on their own, with my support, guidance, holding the space for them to feel safe enough to do so. It's very transformative and very powerful. And when it's so much more efficient with taking those roadblocks out of the way, and the pathway to their goals. Suddenly they're achieving what 2 months ago they were saying they'd never be able to get to, and they're doing it without them even noticing. Oh, it's fine. Problem's gone. And so that's what we find.
And for that, they need you or someone like you. And I'm going to ask you in a second to say a bit more about how people can find you, because I am aware also that we are getting to the end of our interview. That I know you're a busy man, and I want to honor the time that you've generously given us to our viewers and listeners.
Thank you. We're okay.
Before I ask you a little bit more about how people can find you, could because again, I'm thinking they need you in order to do that work. But if you were to give our viewers and listeners in a minute or two, if you were to give them 3 pieces of advice, or 3 things, 3 steps that you would recommend to improve their life today, what would those be? What would you say would help people improve their life?
What, of course, the end of 3 pieces of useful advice. Are you getting enough sleep? Is the first one. I think in general, if you're getting less than 6 hours, then that needs to be reviewed.
Okay.
Food and mood diary. What is it that's coming in? Is that healthy? And how is it you're feeling in relation to what you know that comes in? Often it's very surprising and very revealing for people. How they feel after, for example, having something refined and processed, lots of sugar in it, particularly, how they feel after that. I mean, often it's actually not that good. It's just like a 3-minute hit, and then the blood sugar level drops down below it was before they even ingested the food. It's not even food, it's something that's less than food. So, you know, replacing those artificial kind of, let's say, value in food through fluff and foam, empty calories. Trying to replace that with something that's more vital, more living, raw food. Yeah.
And for that, people would write down what they eat every day, and they would also write how they are feeling. Is that what,
so? There's a format I work with. Yeah. So it's just a very basic. You know, there's 4 time periods from 6 to 10 a.m., 10 to 2 p.m., 2 to 6 p.m., and then 6 to 10 p.m. And in those periods, there's what comes in terms of what's ingested and how one feels between 1 and 3. It could be sad face, neutral face, happy face, something as simple as that. And do that for a week. Just see what one comes out with. It's just very interesting exercise to reflect on. Thirdly, I mean, you know, within that, obviously, we need to observe that it should be between 3, or let's say 5 portions of fruit or vegetables a day. There should be something that's raw, something that's alive. And the processed stuff, it's the real nutrition stripped out of it. So something that's vital, something that's got cells that are intact and still living in it, as close to its natural state as we possibly can get, and manage to do the job of digestion, producing things like that. It's very good. And exercise, physical exercise. So noting perhaps even within that same diary, how many times are you actually doing more than 20 minutes exercise a day? Exercise. So more than 20 minutes exercise is 3 times a week, I think, minimum. Really, that's going to be helping your brain function and reducing, you know, sluggish ways of working and efficient ways of working with a job, and even in, you know, doing the things you love. You're going to be more enjoyable when you actually do physical exercise, because your brain's much more able to process information, take in information in the first place. Biochemically speaking, it's homeostasis much more. So cardio is really key. The balance between the strength and the flexibility in the body needs to be there as well. How close am I to that beautiful, strong, vital tree, the tree which is the picture between strength and flexibility? So I like to use this image. A well-rooted and strong tree will snap in 2 if it is not flexible enough in the storm, right in the trunk or one of the big branches. So that strength needs to be balanced with flexibility so that it can bend in the wind. And look at trees, observe them, how they move in a storm, in the wind. You have to be like that tree. You have to be well-rooted. You have to have strength and a balance with that flexibility.
It's a good image. And so just to recap, so basically, are you getting enough sleep? And if you're getting under 6 hours, review that, food and mood diary, and physical exercise.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, John. So how do people find you?
So you can find me at www.mindbodycentre.co.uk. That's the English way of spelling the centre with an RE at the end. So www.mindbodycentre.co.uk. You can email me, John, at mindbodycentre.co.uk. Instagram. My Body Centers on Instagram also. I'm going to be producing YouTube videos in the near future. That's going to be a new channel that's starting, much more focused on the physical fitness, Olympic weightlifting techniques, how to create a situation where you're not going to be suffering from repetitive strain in various sport modalities. So you can find me there, and that's I could let you know through the website link, the Mind Body Center website link. There'll be a link to the YouTube channel there, and there'll be lots of really exciting free content around the subject matter we've been discussing today to help you feeling in keeping sustainability in your health, fitness, and vitality. Okay.
Great, and we will make sure that we put a link to your website on ours and also on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much, John, for generously giving us your time.
It's a pleasure.
Is there anything else burning that you want to say to our viewers and listeners before we end?
Thank you for offering. Yeah, I'd say stay in. I mean, I've spent many years not feeling enough for whatever reason. Feeling what you, whatever you are feeling, really is. It's so rich in the information that's available, even in the physical body. The emotions are kind of attached to the feelings you have in your physical body. They are gateways into new and greater understandings about yourself and about how to help yourself. And then all that knowledge is such an abundance that you can share with everybody you know. And I found that richness and sense of purpose really strongly aligned, helping people through understanding myself in the first place. Number one first, and then you can help everybody more, because, you know, at the end of the day, if you're limping along like, you know, some of the practitioners that I know who have worked from not getting themselves what they need first, their practice suffers, and they come to me to train to help their own clients, wider community all around the world. So let's just have this a vision of healthy, sustainable living for yourself. Live by example, and that will reach people. People will understand themselves better because you're giving them that shining example of confidence from knowing yourself on the inside, not projecting just a superficial image on the exterior. Okay.
Great. So thank you for those words of wisdom, John, and thank you for giving us your time, and keep up the good work.
Pleasure.
And all the best.